To monitor our Pulsar cluster, we'll be using Prometheus and Grafana. If you aren't familiar with Prometheus and Grafana, we will go ahead and you'll get to see after we do the install what the purpose of each of those components is. We're going to be using the default Prometheus-community Helm charts. The default settings are enough to collect the statistics that we need for now. And then for Grafana, we're going to be using a special image that already has a set of Grafana dashboards that are optimized for private cloud. Now, you may have noticed I said we're going to be installing Prometheus with Helm. So while we used the operators to install Pulsar Private Cloud, we're going to be using Helm instead for Prometheus and Grafana. So if you haven't already installed Helm, you're going to need to do that. I've included this link after the video for installing Helm. I have Mac OS here, so I just use Brew, but you'll have to do whatever is specific to your particular system. Just to show that I have Helm installed here, I'm going to do a Helm version. You'll be able to see that I have this particular version of Helm installed. Next, we're going to install Prometheus using Helm. So first I'm going to be adding the Helm repo for Prometheus community. I'll include, of course, all of these commands. After the video, I already had it installed, or the Helm repo added, so it says it already exists. And then we typically would run a Helm repo update to make sure we have the latest versions of everything. While we're doing this, I'm also going to add the Helm repo for Grafana. Mine already exists, but yours will say it got added. It'll download it, and then I'll do a Helm repo update. So to start, let's go ahead and start installing Prometheus first. So we're going to first create a new namespace called Monitor, where we're going to be installing both Prometheus and Grafana. So we'll do a kubectl create namespace monitor. And then we're going to install the Prometheus Helm charts. And I'm going to include the command after the video, but here it is: Helm install Prometheus, Prometheus community, Prometheus in the monitor namespace, and then we're going to set a few particular variables to false. So we're going to turn some stuff off that we don't need. We're going to let that go ahead and do the Helm install. And then before we move on to Grafana, let's actually take a look at Prometheus a little bit. So here it said Prometheus servers can be accessed, so we're on revision 1 of deploying into that namespace. So if you were to go ahead and make any changes, the revision number would change for Helm. But what I can do is do a kubectl get all and monitor, and we'll see what we actually installed. So here we have Prometheus server. It's not running yet. We have the service. So we're actually going to want to expose this service. This by default doesn't expose. Remember, if we did the kubectl get all and Pulsar, we actually had an exposed endpoint for our proxy. By default, this Helm chart does not expose anything, so we're going to have to expose that. Let me go ahead and clear this, and we'll check again. And it's not quite up and running yet, so let's wait just one more minute, and we'll have to wait till this says 2 out of 2 and the deployment says 1 out of 1. You can see here that we're now up and running with Prometheus server 2 out of 2, deployment's 1 out of 1, replica set 1 is ready. We want to expose this endpoint, so I'm going to use kubectl expose service. And that service that I want to expose is called prometheus-server. That's this service here. We're going to name it prom-external. And we're going to basically be forwarding port 9090 to 9090 of our exposed. And it's going to be of type LoadBalancer in the monitor namespace. Because we already have the network load balancer installed for AWS, for our Kubernetes cluster, I'm going to do a kubectl get all and monitor. That network load balancer should pick up that we want an external IP. So this is going to be our URL. This is HTTP at this point, and it's going to be on port 9090. So it can take up to 5 minutes for this to be exposed publicly because it's a new address. So let's wait 5 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and open Chrome, and we're going to hit that endpoint on port 9090, and we're going to take a look at what's going on with Prometheus. So if we go to http nos:// that endpoint that showed up for our Prometheus service, load balancer, and then :9090, we're going to end up at this page here. Now, this is using the completely default install for prometheus-community, which is okay, because by default it has source discovery or service discovery set up. It's going to be able to find your pods inside of your Kubernetes cluster. Now, if I go ahead and check status and go to targets, this is what it was able to find and is allowed to scrape. So here, I go to Kubernetes pods in particular. We're going to see that it found 12 pods that it's allowed to scrape. And they are, the component here is bookie, zookeeper, broker, zookeeper, etc. And then in the Cloud StreamNative IO cluster name, it's private cloud. And that's because of the specific settings we used inside of our YAML file when we did our private cloud Pulsar cluster installation through the operator. So I've already set up that YAML file to be compatible with Prometheus to scrape the correct items. And then now we need to make sure that our Grafana dashboards are compatible with this naming convention that we have used here, where there's different components and the cluster name is private cloud for all of those. So these should all say up at this point. If yours aren't, you might want to do some troubleshooting. I can help out as your trainer. Definitely contact training because we need to get all of the metrics up. Because what we're going to do now is Prometheus is going to be scraping information off of all of our pods, and Grafana is going to allow us to graph them. And what we're going to do is every time we do things in the course, as different things come up, as they break, intentionally hopefully, or as we start publishing messages, we're going to use the Grafana dashboards to monitor them to see what's going on. So you get used to start using those Grafana dashboards. So now that our pods are up in Prometheus, or they're showing that they're being scraped, we want to go ahead and now install Grafana. We're going to install Grafana in the same monitor namespace. We've already added the repo to Helm. So we're ready to actually run the install. And I mentioned we're going to need to use a special image. I don't want to use the default image that's used by Grafana, because we're going to use an image that already has the dashboards pre-installed that we want for private cloud. I would check the commands after the video to look at what the latest command is. Here I have a very specific image from one of our engineers who's been working on this. So helm install, Grafana, monitor, namespace. This is the image. We've likely, by the time you're using this, we've likely moved where that image is and the image tag. So what version of the image, because we're constantly making changes to those as we continue to develop private cloud. So definitely look at the command after the video, but we're going to install Grafana here into the monitor namespace. And once that Helm install goes through, we're going to go ahead and check the monitor namespace to see what has shown up for Grafana. So I'll do a kubectl get all and monitor. So you'll see that we're still creating this container for Grafana. And just like with Prometheus, Grafana service came up, but it's not exposed by default. So we wait a couple minutes, we'll wait for the rest of the stuff come up, and then we'll expose the Grafana service just like we had done for Prometheus. So here I've run kubectl get all and monitor. Our Grafana pod is up and running. Not exposed yet. The deployment says that it's up, and the replica set says that it's up. Next, let's go ahead and expose it. Here's our command, kubectl expose. Again, this is going to work because we already have the network load balancer installed for you for your EKS cluster. It says that's exposed. We're going to do a kubectl get all and monitor. We'll see that there's a new service now, Grafana external, and here's our endpoint. So let me go ahead and copy that as well, and it's going to be on port 3000. Before we move on, we're also going to need to get the password for the admin account. I'm going to go ahead and, when you first did the install, there was a little command that said to get the password, run this. I have that down in the comments after the video for you, but it's kubectl get secret namespace monitor, and then there's some additional requests there. So this is going to be that password for you. I also included directions on how to reset the password if you ever need to, you need to directly log in to the Grafana pod. So you'd have to go check your deployment and get this exact pod name. And then once you're in the pod, you can go ahead and there's a command to reset that password. So here I am in Grafana. For the username, I'll do admin. And then the password, I'm going to paste in that password that I got out in the previous step. Go ahead and log in. If we go over to the far left and go to dashboards, open general, these are the dashboards that we're going to be using for private cloud. These are those that are installed only because we use that special image that we've included for you for private cloud that includes these. If I go over to instance the overview dashboard, you can see that it sees that we have 3 zookeepers, 3 bookies, and 3 brokers, and all 3 are currently up. If you want to change the rate at which Grafana checks Prometheus for data to be faster than 1 minute, you can always increase that. That doesn't this over here on the right, it doesn't actually increase the scrape rate. That's a function inside of Prometheus and is one of the default configuration items for the scrape rate. We're going to have no data yet on messaging storage, messaging backlog. That's fine. We haven't actually started publishing any messages, but we're going to come back to these dashboards. This is just the overview dashboard. We're going to use things like the broker dashboard and the bookie dashboard throughout the course. Now, some of the additional metrics like the CPU and memory, those are related to the Kubernetes pods, and that's more of a Kubernetes overview as opposed to a Pulsar overview. Those are currently not scraping because we haven't installed Node-exporter, which would monitor your nodes and start collecting data on the Kubernetes nodes. And to remind you, we have 8 of those nodes that we've given you as part of your Kubernetes cluster. So once you've been able to get this dashboard, we should be good for now, and we'll continue to use the Grafana dashboards throughout the course. So you should definitely save a copy of this URL, again, on port 3000.